Alright, guys, you are watching the first episode of the Age of Distraction. How are you doing out there? I hope you are doing well. I've given it a lot of thought as to what was the first thing that I wanted to speak on. I have been kind of enthralled as of late in what the media and I guess the creators themselves are referring to as the Manosphere. Guys like Rollo Tomasi, Fresh and Fit. I was familiar with Andrew Tate before this became kind of a group thing. I think Andrew Tate has an interesting story. I like some of the stuff he says. I like some of the stuff Fresh and Fit says. They have a very, very, very entertaining show that they put a tremendous amount of work into. And they deserve a lot of the success, all the success that they are enjoying at this point. Nobody can argue that they don't work their ass off. The ideology, I get it. I kind of look at it as the same way as I look at the Manosphere and a lot of the sort of angry rhetoric launched towards women. I look at it the same way that I look at the rise of the alt-right and white nationalism and the white identity politics kind of bursting on the scene during the Trump era. And when I would speak to people about this, I would always explain that my theory as far as the alt-right and how all that came to be was after 8 years of Obama and being bombarded by social justice topics constantly, and as a result, white men feeling white guilt, that they went in an opposite direction. So instead of sort of just sitting couched in their guilt, they decide to say, hey, screw y'all. We love being white. We love our history. We love what our ancestors did, yada, yada, yada. We built this country. Jews will not replace us, blah, blah. So the Manosphere is kind of the same thing. We've had Me Too. We've had, all these different viral sort of feminist-based movements that have gained traction in the last few years, and we've had a lot of people telling us men that we're terrible, that we've ran society into the ground, we've controlled society in a way that has stifled and dominated and taken advantage of women. Now, all these things are true, right? For certain men, for certain countries, at certain times, all through the course of history. But I think when certain men hear these types of criticisms, it's very difficult for them to separate themselves from the criticism. So, they apply. We speak about things in generalities is the problem. And we would love to look at the world as if it was completely black and white. And we know it isn't. We know it's more nuanced. We know it's the full spectrum of color. Now, the full spectrum of color, that's not as entertaining because It's not as radical. The radical point of view is always going to be the most entertaining, the most salacious, and going to garner the most attention. But we're in a time in history where women get shit done, right? Women make money. Women have careers. Women are mothers and have careers. You know, my mother was a mother and she worked all through my childhood. Women do this. There's nothing wrong with that. It's very difficult. But, you know, there's one particular thing that I would like to address because of my personal experience with it. There has been a topic on Fresh and Fit recently, and it seems to come up again and again and again. And the topic is, should you date a single mother? Now, this is something that I have done just recently. I was actually in a relationship with a single mother for the last 3 years. And, you know, I have a lot of takes on this. You know, I would say, okay, say you meet a girl and you like her and you're interested to the point to where you want to continue to hang out with her and get to know her and see where it goes. And then she drops the bombshell that she has a kid or kids. As far as calculating the fact that she has a kid, as far as that being a determinative factor as to you wanting to move forward with her, I think the age of the kid, I think it should be a major point as far as deciding if you want to continue or not. So I'll tell you a little bit about my situation with my ex-girlfriend. She has 2 kids. When I started dating her, her son was 16 and her daughter was 12. The son's father is not around because he died in a car crash when he was 1 month old. And the daughter's father, he's in a different relationship. You know, they broke up around, you know, when she was a baby, and in the last few months he was actually in prison. I mean, I don't mean to laugh at that. Interesting enough, here's a good anecdote. So the reason that my ex's baby daddy is in prison still currently is because the girl that he's been with for several years, 5 or 6 years, and who is like a surrogate mother to my ex's daughter, Raina. He's in prison because his girl and her son from another man have never gotten along, right? So the son comes over one day and he's raging out, and my ex's baby daddy goes to his bedroom and grabs a shotgun and shoots through the kitchen floor. And of course the cops are called, and he was arrested because he was a 3-time felon, and they confiscated several guns from him. So, you know, they put him in prison. He doesn't even have a court date. He's been sitting in there for months, and they're not telling him anything. So, age is a very important thing. So if you meet a girl that you like and she has a newborn, for instance, or a baby, or a boy or a girl that's 2, 3, 4, 5, that's one thing, right? Because at the very least, a young child is going to be automatically respectful of you and is going to be open to allowing you to show them who you are, and as they grow up, you'll have the opportunity to mold them, so to speak. Now, if it's more like the situation that I was in, where they're already teenagers, now that's a zero-sum game, right? Because especially if it's a teenage boy, you're coming into an environment where the teenage boy believes himself to be the man of the house and sort of the alpha in the situation. So the first time I met my ex's son, this is literally what he said to me. I said, "Oh, hello, my name is Ron. Nice to meet you." He goes, "Oh, by the way, next time you're fucking my mother, be sure to close the door." And he's standing there with his jerk-off fucking friends, and they're sitting there chuckling, and it was the most awkward experience I've ever been in. And, you know, essentially what that was him, you know, peeing on his territory, you know, trying to like bully me, trying to be alpha, you know, and then on top of all that, he was very, now we're talking about a white suburban 16-year-old boy, right? Grew up fairly privileged life, you know, has never really struggled other than having lost his father when he was a baby. But, you know, I meet him and he's like, "Yo, dude, you know what I'm saying, bruh? Stop capping." And all the, he's actually the first person, I didn't know what cap, when I was a teenager, cap meant something way different than what it means now. But he told me that I was capping about something, and he proceeded to explain to me that that meant lie, and, you know, so just a little bit of a side here. You know, I'm a black man who grew up in the South, and I grew up primarily around white people, and I grew up with, and still have, many influences, and I like things that people wouldn't consider stereotypically black, right? I liked metal, I still like metal, punk, you know, post-rock, blues, jazz, you know, I mean, I like hip-hop, I like rap, but, you know, it's not, I've never believed that there was a correlation between race and identity, and I believe that the correlation, it's a forced one if it does exist in society, right? But believing all that stuff, you know, when I met this kid, you know, the first thing I thought was, like, who does this kid think he is? You know? And I really had to sort of put myself in check, because what is going on with culture, right? Popular culture, as far as what influences what is deemed cool are dangerous, are sexy, or whatever. In my day and age, I'm a Gen Xer, so it was still rock and roll to a certain extent. Well, for the most part. I mean, hip-hop, gangster rap was just coming on the scene and starting to influence culture. But now you have primarily rap and hip-hop being it's the central thing of which fashion branches off from, dialects and ways of speech and slang. So I hear people say, very often I hear people say, the culture. And every time I hear that, I'm like, what does that mean? And over the last couple of years, I've come to believe that what people mean by the culture is we've taken hip-hop and rap adjacent things, and we've repackaged it into this thing called the culture. And so it's essentially something that you can open up a dresser in the morning and take out a Supreme shirt or whatever it is, and simply by virtue of putting it on your person, on your body, you are a part of the culture. It's just I come from a time where authenticity meant something, and frankly, I think it's sad, and I've always felt like it's sad, that it's been sad, that people feel like they have to alter who they are. Because, this kid, he was in high school, right? It's sort of a kind of urban high school in Nashville, Tennessee. And so he was, he played basketball. He most of his friends were black. And his mother actually shed quite a bit of light on this one day when she told me that when he was in middle school and starting high school, he complained to her that all the girls that he was interested in liked black guys. And so, this was her opinion. She felt like he had adopted this sort of style of speak and slang and way of dress and kind of this swagger, as a way to be more appealing to women. And, I guess I can't really fault the kid for all this, but, really it's for me, it's about authenticity, man, because when you know somebody's story, when you know where they came from, who raised them, how they were raised, and they stand before you, the living embodiment of a contradiction, it sort of rubs you the wrong way, especially if it's a white kid who's been very sheltered and privileged and wants to act like he's gangster or a thug or, it's silly. But anyway, so that was the first encounter with my ex's son. And, there were a couple of moments, where we actually got to hang out and talk and relate to each other, and but he was a very, I want to say, troubled boy. I don't think I don't see. This is the problem. So on Fresh and Fit, they were talking about, I believe it was academics or something, was saying, well, if he gave an example that he was with a girl and he liked this girl so much that he was willing to let her move in, but he didn't want her kid in his house, so he was willing to buy them an apartment close by, and then she could arrange for a babysitter or whatever, and then she could go over to his crib. So this is a fantasy, right? And I'm telling you this because this is anecdotal, because at some point, and even my ex was telling me this. She was saying, I just need you to be with me. I don't need you to be anything to my children. I don't need you to have a relationship with my children, yada yada yada. And so that sounds good in theory, but it simply does not work and is not realistic whatsoever. Okay, I tried it. What that essentially boils down to is pretending like somebody doesn't exist, and then the other person, they pretend like you don't exist, and it's very awkward. It makes for a very bad time around the home that you sometimes are both or all three occupying. I will say it takes an incredibly strong-willed, confident, decisive person to go into a situation and be a stepfather or a stepmother. And it is something that I find, if you can do it well and you can become an influence in a child's life, that is to be congratulated and that is to be admired. Okay? There are so many scumbags out there who they get it in, they do a little skeet in a woman, and then they bounce, right? Which sounds all well and good, and the red pill people will tell you that that's what you should do and that's how it should be. But if you get a woman pregnant, you need to be a damn man and take care of that kid, despite what your relationship is with the mother. It doesn't matter. For a lot of men, it's okay, I'm going to have a romantic relationship with the mother, and I'm going to have a relationship with the kid, or I'm not going to have a romantic relationship with the mother, and I'm not going to have a relationship with the kid. Which is bullshit. A human being needs a person with feminine energy and a person with masculine energy. That is the surefire, most time-tested, proven way to raise a stable, functioning member of society who can go out and maneuver through this messy, murky, stormy thing we call life. Both of those influences are so important, and probably the biggest reason they're so important is, I believe there's two components that are necessary for raising a kid who won't completely go off the rails and throw their life away. They need to have a certain level of respect for their parents and a certain level of fear for their parents. And that fear, that's when when a kid, and this will happen all through your life. You know, when you're thinking about doing some crap, some bad things, and you hear your father's voice in the back of your head, your mother's voice in the back of your head, that's what I'm talking about. It's very difficult for just a woman. A woman may be able, a single mother may be able to garner and gain respect from her kids, but the fear part may be a more difficult thing to influence in their children. And that was the deal with my ex. You know, she cared way more about being liked by her children than being a disciplinarian. She couldn't stand being in a position to where she didn't feel liked by her children, and she didn't quite understand how disempowering that is, right? Because you can't care about if they like you or not if you're going to be able to strip them of certain privileges or certain physical items, you know, their cell phone, you know, whatever it is, the Xbox 360, the Xbox One, the laptop, you know, the car. I mean, you have to be able to not care that they're mad at you, right? Like, that's the only way that you're going to be able to properly punish them when need be, and the time is going to come, you know. So, you know, they were talking about this on Fresh and Fit the other night. It is weird when you're with a single parent, because when something does pop off, you know that you should probably be neutral and stay out of it, but there is going to become a point where you are thrust into it, or you feel an overwhelming need to interject your opinion, or put in a comment or whatever, you know, and that has to, you have to feel welcomed to do so. Because if you're gonna set up a situation where, again, you know, this whole notion of, oh, I'll date the woman, but I'm not gonna have anything to do with the kid, and there's gonna be this invisible Great Wall of China in between us, and you know, I won't peek over my side of the wall, and they won't peek over their side. It's just not possible. It's not possible. And they're going to end up resenting you for it, because they're going to be able to see that you're actually intentionally trying not to engage with them. You know, the problem is, you know, when you want to care about somebody, and this is anybody of any age, their first instinct is to be a bit sus, as my ex's son said, suspect of you, and they're going to make it as difficult as possible for you to gain sort of access to their mind and their heart. You know, they're going to make it as difficult as possible, and it's something that you're going to have to, the same way you courted the woman, you're going to have to court the children. It's a different type of courting, right? And it takes an incredible amount of delicacy, because you don't want to do things that come off as if you're pandering. And the fact of the matter is, you know, in a lot of these situations, anything you do for them is going to come off as pandering. But you can't really worry about what they may possibly think, You just have to do things out of the goodness of your heart, and you're probably not going to get much appreciation out of them. You may not even get a fucking thank you out of them. But you take it on the chin, and you remind yourself that you're talking about kids or teenagers here, and try to put yourself back into the mindset that you were in when you were a kid or you were a teenager, because that's a very difficult thing too. Because me personally, I don't have children of my own, so I went all this time not really engaging with kids or teenagers much, and then being thrust back into that, I couldn't remember what it felt like to be a kid or a teenager. And therefore, it was very difficult for me to put myself in that mindset, or to I was apathetic to the plight of a child or a teenager, of how confusing that time can be, and also how adults look to you, when you're that age, right? Like, they just look silly, they look unnecessary, they're the fun police. You hide things from them, you hide yourself from them, you speak to adults in sort of this very robotic yes, no, maybe kind of way. You don't quite express yourself. You're irritated when adults try to engage with you. So these are all things that you're gonna face if you choose to date a single mother. So yeah, I have been very interested in the RP, Manosphere type stuff, and I think it is fascinating that we're in a time where so many young men believe they need these online gurus to teach them how to speak to women and how to attract women. And the fact that a lot of young men are having such a hard time with women, I don't think it has anything to do with your abilities and your attractiveness and with the amount of money you have. I think younger guys were born into a world where the primary mode of communication is text messaging and through social platforms, and that has robbed you of the privilege of growing up and having to approach a woman and speak to her face to face. This is something that younger people have done less and less of, and as time goes on and as these technologies become more and more the norm. They are the norm now, but it's hard to argue that the world and that the human experience and the way that we interface with each other is becoming less human. I love these platforms. I love this technology. I love the access to art and music and literature and information and gaming and all these things, but all these things are at the expense of the human connection that is central, that is absolutely necessary in life. It's very difficult to influence someone to love you or to make them feel like they want to get to know you better via text. And I think that's why you see on your social media, or excuse me, your dating apps and your platforms, the most attractive guys win out. The guys that, you know, that do all the fresh and fit. It's all about appearances. It's all about, showing that you have this and that. Because the most surface type stuff wins out on those platforms. Unless you're a very prolific sort of text writer, right? But in person, you can look them in the eye. They can feel your energy, because really what it comes down to with sexual attraction is all of us human beings, all mass, all matter, is it's vibrating and undulating at different intervals, right? We're all on different frequencies, on different wavelengths. And so you can't be a man that's your frequency's up here and a woman's frequency's down here. And for you to be able to get your wavelengths to where they're parallel to where she's going to feel comfortable engaging in some sort of sexual activity with you, that's very difficult. You have to meet somebody that's, they can't be, you know what I mean? Like, they got to be. And so that only comes with getting out and talking to women, and I'll tell you another thing. I think a lot of men feel like they say, okay, so I'm into video games, I'm into football, I'm into guns, I'm into this and that, so I gotta meet a girl that's into those things. And if you did meet a girl that was into all those things and you could just sit there and talk to her about all these things ad nauseum, after a while you probably, your sexual desire for her will probably shrink, because you'll start to see yourself in her, and she'll end up feeling just like one of the guys, and you won't be getting that feminine energy that turns a man on as much. So, they say opposites attract. That isn't always true, but I do think that is true, just as far as masculine energy and feminine energy. And men are going to be into certain things that are more masculine, and women are going to be into certain things that are more feminine in nature. And you're going to be able to expose each other to these things, right? Like, you want to find somebody who awakens new interest in you and who inspires you to step out of this little box that you've built for yourself, that you feel comfortable in. Somebody that teaches you how to laugh at yourself. Somebody that teaches you how to be a bit more tender, a bit more empathetic, a bit more understanding. And these things can't be faked. It's a natural progression. And, I'm not some guru. I'm not a Mac or a pimp or a player or any of those things. I do have a 25-year track record with dating. I've done the promiscuous one-night stand, meeting women at bars and clubs thing. I've been in several lengthy relationships. I've been engaged, and I do find that I have fairly good luck with women, when I go out, and it's not just with women, it's just with strangers. I like to go out alone and speak to strangers, but it's something, it takes a certain amount of finesse and sort of, it's not something you try to do, right? You don't want to look like you're out trying to meet people. It's just something, you just naturally, you engage people, and it could be men, it could be women. And I know, anybody that stumbles upon this video, you maybe say, oh, why would I go out and speak to random men? Other men know women, right? I mean, you have no idea what befriending another guy might lead into. He may end up being a friend. He may have a girlfriend who has girlfriends. He may have a wife who has girlfriends. It's really, and somebody put it this way for me back when, several years ago, when I was feeling very lonely and wondering, how the hell do I meet somebody? And they said, you can't, when you have two broken branches, right, that are floating downstream in a river, and one's floating ahead and another one's back a few miles, it's very difficult to speed that branch up and to get it to meet up with the one that's ahead. So you sort of have to, you do what you do, you do what you enjoy, you do what you love, and in those settings is when you're going to be the most comfortable and the most happy and the most personable and the most appealing. And during the course of those moments, when you're naturally floating with the river's current, and there's others around you that are floating naturally down the river's current, you're gonna bump up against each other naturally, right? Because you're both headed in the same direction, right? But if you're headed in opposite directions, it's very difficult to meet up. So, hey, thanks for listening. If you stumbled upon this video, there'll be more randomness and insanity to come. Please like and subscribe and all that jazz. See you next time.